Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Anonymous Hedgehog podcast. My name is Rich.
And I'm Maya.
And today we're going to be contemplating death. So I sort of had this question earlier. I was talking to my friend who's gotten really into like astrology and creating predictions based off of like star patterns, which that's a separate topic. I'm not even sure if I would believe in that, but he was pretty confident in saying like he has the ability now to predict when a person is going to die, like down to the day and hour. And he was saying like, and it's super precise and like he's done it before and it's worked. So, you know, aside from the fact
He's done
of
it
like
before and it worked.
like he's used the same like process to map out other people's deaths who have already died and gotten the death day to like match the day they died or something. Which I'm not too sure if I even believe that, but like just the concept of being able to tell when someone's going to die really, really intrigued me. And I wanted to ask you, like if I could tell you when you were going to die, would you want to know, or would you want me to keep it a secret?
I think that I would want to know, because I feel like the uncertainty of not knowing when you're going to die makes life really challenging, because I feel like, because right now we're like both pretty young and we both have a lot of plans for our lives in the future, right? But those plans could change depending on when we die. Like I was just thinking about this the other day. I was like, oh, like I have all these plans for my future, but what if I die when I'm like, when I'm like 50, or what if I die when I'm 30? I was thinking like, oh, what year, like how old do I want to be when I get married? How old do I want to be when I want to have kids? But like, what if I like, let's say that I want to have my first kid by like 30 or whatever. What if I die when I'm 30? Like that's
then
just
would you
crazy.
Still have your kid? Yeah,
but that's just like crazy that like all of this could change dependent on when you're actually going to die. And I think that like knowing, like having a set end date for your life actually does, I feel like it would be kind of settling to me, because I would know how to plan around that. But now it's more like it's just up in the air. It's uncertain. I don't know how to plan. What about you?
I don't know. This question just kept me up for a long time, because I can actually just ask him, because he is my friend, and I can genuinely get a date from him. And like just the question of do I ask him or not is really unsettling to me, because if I do know when I'm going to die, like it's going to change the way I live my life. It's going to change my behavior. And I don't know if that's organic, and I don't know if that's natural. And I feel like if we're doing something as unnatural as changing our behavior because of some artificial number that someone else gave us, that can be really detrimental.
Yeah, that's true too. Like if like the reason that I like exercise a lot and then I eat, like try to eat healthy, is because I want to live a longer life. But if I knew that I was going to die when I'm like 30, I wouldn't bother doing any of that, because you know that it can't change the outcome.
Yeah, and that would still end up having bad effects, because exercising has its other benefits. Like you just feel better in the day. But if you just stopped completely because you were like, oh, there's no hope anyway, then you would lose out on those effects too. And like going along with the whole exercise thing, like I've been doing a lot of, like I've probably never done more exercise in my life than during this quarantine. And I sometimes think about it, and it's like, what if I'm doing all of this and I look so good now, and like this is my peak, and then by the time like the country reopens and other people can even see me, like I've lost all of my like gains or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like this is sort of related to what you said, but like I feel like the reason that I do work out a lot is because like I know that I have like a certain like prime in your like body or whatever. So like what, for example, like once you're 50, like I mean obviously you can still be attractive, but like having like a six pack and like being really toned won't be the same anymore, I guess. It's just like, so I want to be kind of like fit like and healthy while I'm young, but I guess all of that changes if someone told me that I was going to die when I was 25. Like I think it's so weird. It changes like your entire set of priorities. Like imagine like what your priorities are like now, you know, like finish college and then maybe go to grad school and get a job and whatever. Like, but if you were told you were going to die like at like 25, your entire set of priorities would be different, right?
Yeah, would you still go to college?
I don't think I would go to college.
I think really.
I would drop out like right now. If someone told me I was going to die at 25, I would not like waste my time in school.
What would you do instead?
I'd probably get married. Is it weird to say I would have kids? I feel like I would have kids.
You would? Is it?
Yeah,
that's like a moral
kids.
question. Like, would you have kids knowing that your kids will end up like having their mother die?
That's so
like,
weird.
That's a moral question. I feel like I wouldn't.
I guess. I guess you would have. They would still have, I guess, a father. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. But I think I would have kids if like I knew that I would die. I mean, yeah, I think I would do it anyway. But that is sad, like bringing life into the world, but then knowing that you're just gonna leave them behind.
I mean, what's the benefit of it? And you're also leaving behind your husband. He's probably gonna have to get remarried or something. Like what's the point? Isn't that just a bunch of like ripples in relationships that you could have just avoided?
I don't know, but like I feel like the concept of dying without having kids actually is kind of scary to me.
Really?
Yeah, because like it's like the end of your line, you know? It's like the end of your genetic line. Like,
oh, and you don't have siblings.
Yeah, like, and also like, so when my parents die and I die, like that's it. Like,
but who cares? Like for me, like, yeah, it's appealing to me, but the appeal doesn't come from, oh, I need to like spread my genes. The appeal comes from like, it'd be interesting to be able to like I almost think of having kids as like sponsoring a company. Like it'd be like investing in a stock. Like you're investing your time, energy, education into this one kid to see how successful they'll be. But it has nothing to do with like I want to spread my genes, because I don't see any benefit in that. Like, how does that help me?
Well, that's not the only reason. A lot of it is like I do genuinely want to be a mother and I want to care for my kids, but I feel like it's not like you're spreading your DNA. It's kind of like you want to leave some kind of imprint on the world, if that makes sense. Like, you know, you don't want like, if like once you die, like you don't want like all of your image and all that you've left behind to die with you. Because like, think of like, it's kind of the idea of just like, would you rather have no one remember you? You know, like.
Yeah, but like when people remember me, they don't remember my great-great-great-grandfather who like gave birth to someone which ultimately caused me to be there like 6 generations later. Like when people remember me, they remember like the accomplishments I've had and the things I do and my hobbies.
Well, I guess that's true too. Like just because you have kids, like that doesn't mean your memory is going to kind of last longer. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but it is the idea of just kind of leaving it's like leaving your print on the world, even though the people that remember you are all gone, right? Like you are still there in some capacity.
Yeah, but like I guess you've left your mark on the world like that. Yeah, no question about it. You're leaving your mark on the world because that child has your genetic information, but you're gone. Like you are dead. So what is the benefit to you to leave your mark on the world after you've already died, right? Like how does that help you if you're not even there to reap the benefits?
Oh, that was kind of we were talking about like the delayed gratification thing.
Yeah, like, the human sacrifice.
Yeah, human sacrifice. No, but I think it's the same thing with like your career too. Like people that want to, like humanitarians that want to change the world. Like what is the point? Like, you know, like what is the point if they never see the change that they make? Like once they're dead, like, you know, they want to change, like, you know, they want to help the poor or whatever, but like once they die, they will never like see that change. So like, what is the point?
Yeah, this really does go back into our other discussion, because it's like it gives you gratification while you're alive, knowing that things will change while you're dead. So it's like it's like the opposite of delayed gratification. It's like pre-gratification.
Pre-gratification. That's so weird, because like what if you start, like, for example, you're like a humanitarian, you start this like nonprofit and then you die. And then you die thinking that you're going to change the world. But what if you don't actually change the world?
But you've already gotten the pre-gratification. That's like cheating, right?
Yeah, that's that's like cheating through life. But like,
I mean, unless
so
there's
is
like an
that,
afterlife and you can like, but that changes the whole question.
yeah, if there's an afterlife and you can like somehow observe like your like what you did, then that's different. But like you die kind of like deluding yourself into this notion that you have somehow made an impact on the world. And the truth is you didn't. It's kind of like if you're like, this is weird, but like if you have a kid, right? And then your kid like and you raise your kid thinking that he's going to be like a really, or he or she is going to be like really successful, but then you die and then they become a drug addict and they like die or whatever. It's kind of like that. It's just like in your last moments, like you like you're living in like a delusion that you've somehow like lived a good life and like you somehow
Yeah.
changed the world. So that's, I feel like that's kind of back to the ignorant bliss kind of question. It's like,
Dude, all of our podcasts
yeah,
have
is it
always
like,
led back to this question.
so is it like better to like, what if we just delude ourselves before we die into like thinking that we have somehow changed the world and for the better, you know?
Well, that implies that we even get gratification from knowing we've changed the world. Like that implies that your goal is to change the world, and by changing the world you get happiness. I don't think that's everyone's goal. In fact, I think that's like a very small percentage of people's goals.
Really? I've always thought that people secretly all want to change the world.
I think people want to leave an impact on the world, but they don't necessarily want to change the world for the better.
Really? That's so weird to think about. I've always felt like that everyone, I mean, they want to leave their impact, but they also like, I've always thought that every kind of kid or like every young person has this vision that they're going to like benefit society. This is why like activists and things, that's why they do what they do, right? It's like the notion or like that you are somehow part of a bigger history, you know, that you're somehow changing. Like that's why like protests and stuff that's going on, because people want to be a part of that like change, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. But then this also goes back to our other conversation about when we do things for others, we're just secretly doing it for ourselves. Like the whole concept of no act is actually selfless, because everything we do is motivated by selfishness. So if we go through and follow through with that premise, then like we can't say that anyone wants to change the world, right?
That's true, but I guess that they can do both. Like you can want like you change the world, but then you get gratification from it. So like I guess that's like it is selfish, but it's not like it's like inherently good, I guess, because it's a net benefit for society and for you.
Yeah, I remember we talked about that, how it's not mutually exclusive to be selfish and to help others, right?
I feel like this brings an interesting question. Like, does it matter your motivation when you do something good?
I was thinking about, in fact, I had a discussion with my mom about this.
Okay.
And I was telling her our theory of like how we believe everything is selfish. And her response to that was, so what? I was like, what do you mean, so what? Like, it means humans are terrible people. All we do is like care about ourselves. And she said, yeah, but if by being selfish you are helping other people, then what's the problem? And I was like, that's so true.
So I think, okay, so this brings an interesting question. Like, so like, yeah, so like if you're selfish and you help other people, then that's considered a net good. But what if you intended to harm other people, but you inadvertently end up helping them? Does that your motivation count in that point? Like,
That's interesting. That also goes along with something I've been thinking about with like attempted murder versus murder.
yeah.
And how they're tried differently. But why should they be tried differently if your
Yeah,
motivation's
I've always
the same?
felt that too. Yeah, I've always thought that too. Like, it's like the outcome changes it, but like they both intended the same result. But like, I've always thought that too. But like one person was just more successful, and then in their like end goal, and then the other person was unsuccessful, but they had intended to do the same thing.
Yeah, like it could be that like my victim was just like, if I followed through with the murder, it could just be that my victim was like weaker and easier to kill, and I put the same amount of effort into killing them as you did, but you
Yeah.
just couldn't kill them because they're a little stronger. But the fact that I have to spend like a lifetime in prison and you only get to spend like 50 years in prison, like, is that even logical? Like, is that justified?
Yeah, I've always thought that it makes sense from like a legal standpoint. Like I understand why society like it's tried that way. Yeah. But like from a moral standpoint, I feel like it seems inconsistent.
That's so interesting that you bring up a discrepancy between our legal system and our moral institutions. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like usually those two things are supposed to go all like hand in hand. Yeah. Like our moral values should be reflected in our Constitution and our laws. Yeah. But the fact is that like we're always having discussions and debates about like whether or not our laws are actually protecting our morals, which means that our morals themselves are undecided.
Yeah, I do think that I think our moral system is constantly shifting, and I think that like our laws are kind of, it's like a delayed reaction to that. I feel like our morals, like, this is something I felt a lot with like politics and kind of public policy. I feel like the moral standard is constantly shifting, and then the law kind of has to catch up with that.
Do you think the moral standard is shifting for the better or the worse?
I think that we always think that it's shifting for the better, because it's like it's always shifting in the direction of our morals. But like in the grand scheme of things, but like for example, someone 100 years ago might think that it's shifting for the worse because it's shifting away from their morals.
That's interesting. And that comes back to our other topic of objective morality.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, go on.
It's so weird that we think that like we always think that we're improving society, you know, but like the truth is that if we were 100 years, like if someone lived 100 years ago, they'd be like, why are you destroying society? You know, like what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like it's so weird how like our, you know, perception of even doing good is like completely different.
And 100 years isn't even a long time.
Yeah.
Like 100 years, like chances are we'll get to see the majority of 100 years. Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, like we know when we're going to die and it happens to be before the 100 years. But like chances are we're going to see those 100 years. And when we do, we're going to see moral values shifting. But like the question then is, will we notice it? Will we notice society changing its morals, or will our morals have shifted so much that we wouldn't even notice the change? It's like in physics, like, you know, relative motion.
Yeah.
Like if two objects are both moving at the same speed, then they both seem still to each other. So like if my morals and society's morals are shifting at the same time, we're just going to always think that society has the same constant moral beliefs.
So then I guess the question is, what causes society's morals to change? Is it our morals are changing, or is that like society's change is causing our shift in morals?
Yeah.
Because it seems intuitive. It seems intuitive to say that we are changing society's morals, but like the truth is that like a lot of our morals are shaped by society. Mm-hmm. And I think this goes back to kind of like we talked about in another episode of like the two major Democratic Republican parties, kind of like, did we create that binary, or the binary influence how we think? It's like if you think the idea of like back in the Civil War and things like that, like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were just like completely different. Like their platforms were way different than they are now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that goes back to the whole initial question we had about like, would you want to know if you died? Like your comment that like, did the parties influence us, or did we influence the parties? If you know when you're going to die, is that going to influence your lifestyle or not?
And then, yeah, but then, oh yeah, that's true.
But your lifestyle can also influence when you're going to die.
You die.
Yeah. So like if someone told me, look, you're going to die at the age of 30, chances are I'm going to be like, okay, I want to experience everything. I'm going to go skydive. I'm going to like try cocaine. I'm going to do a bunch of dangerous stunts. And that's going to influence the time I die. And I might just die at 20 because I just changed my whole lifestyle.
That's so weird. So what if, okay, this is an interesting question. Like, so what if like it wasn't like static? It was like, given your lifestyle now, this is when you're going to die. But what if you change it and then you can continually increase that like, or decrease that like age?
Yeah. That's so interesting. Or like, just take it a step further. What if they tell you you're gonna die in a car crash?
Yeah,
Would
I
you
feel
ever
like,
go in a car again?
yeah, that's so. But if they tell you you're gonna die in a car crash, like, does not going in a car really prevent you from dying? It's kind of like it basically is our fate like predetermined. You know, it's the kind of idea of like predestination, like Calvinism or whatever. But it's like, you know, like can we actually change our fate?
That is such an interesting question. And I remember having a talk with, I remember staying after school in my science teacher's classroom, and I talked to her for like 2 or 3 hours just after school, because it was such an interesting conversation, and she was telling me about fate. And keep in mind, she's like a bit on the older side, so she has had a lot of life experiences. And she was like, the way I picture it is like you have a pre-written fate, and you know, some things are determined, some things aren't, but you also have flexibility to change your path on the fate, to the extent that like you can change little decisions that you make in your life that change your fate a little bit. But like in the grand scheme of things, like when you're going to die, like who you're going to get married to, like the big events are already pre-decided. And I thought that was a really good way to live by, because that way you have security in the concept of fate, and you have security in the concept that like your decisions don't change your whole life, but you also have confidence knowing that like you have the power to change your life for the better.
I think this reminds me of when I was learning AP European history back in high school. We we learned about like Calvinism. This kind of reminds me of a principle, like, so I was talking about predestination.
Yeah.
And the principle of predestination I feel like was so interesting, because like most people think that like, oh, you're like when you're born you're predestined to go to heaven or you're predestined to go to hell, and like no matter how like good you act, no matter how bad you act in your life, like it's predetermined, so it doesn't matter. But the truth is like that's kind of like a misconception about Calvinism. The real like what Calvin believed was that like if you were destined to go to heaven you would act like it. So like if you were to like, for example, like if you were predestined to go to heaven, like you would go to church and you would be a good citizen, because that's what someone who would go to heaven would act like.
Then what's the point?
It's just like, it's kind of to show that like it's like kind of like fooling yourself. It's like, you know, you can't change it, but like it's kind of like if you knew, like for example, like if you knew that you were going to die at like 100, like you would also do things that like you would act like you would still have a healthy lifestyle, because you were saying like someone who would live to 100 would have a healthy lifestyle.
Oh, it's a positive feedback loop.
Yeah. And I thought that the way that religion, or like the way that they kind of constructed that, was so interesting. It's like because the whole idea is that like if you're predetermined to go to heaven, then like what is the point of your moral obligations? But it's like someone who would go to heaven would follow those moral obligations, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not following them, then you're showing everyone else like, oh yeah, this person is definitely going to hell. But like,
Yeah. Yeah, this is so odd. My mind is like blowing.
yeah,
But, like,
it's just
there's another book I read. What was it called? I mentioned it before, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. And in the section that talked about influencing people, one of the strategies was assume that they've already been influenced. So for example, if you're the CEO of a company and one of your employees is really, really struggling with their job, then tell them, like, you are the best person I know for this job. And tell them like, oh, you do such a great job at this job. And like that gets into their mind of like, oh,
yeah.
wait, I'm like so good at this job, then I need to start acting like it. And so then they have to live up to the expectation you've set.
That's so weird. It's kind of like the idea, like, do we really, like, sometimes we think that we determine our fate, but are we really determining it? And kind of like, if you already knew your fate, would you if you knew the end outcome of like all your hard work, would you change that? Would you not work that hard?
Well, according to this theory, you'd work harder, right? like according to this theory, it's like if someone told me I'm going to be the CEO of a company one day, like you can bet I will be studying management techniques and learning about new startups all day long because I know that I'm going to be a CEO someday.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that would be for me too. Like, if someone told you that you're going to be successful, you would want to act like someone that is going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if that applies for everyone.
Yeah, there's definitely another side to it. Like there's definitely the side of like, oh, like I'm gonna be a CEO anyway, so I might as well party now.
But I guess, yeah, I think that, yeah, I don't think it applies to everyone. I think that like there are people that would take advantage of that kind of system. But I guess it's like we can never actually determine like if we have free will or not. I guess it's like, does it even matter if we have free will? Because if we had free will, would we do anything different if we didn't? Like, like.
That's what's so interesting about these philosophical questions. Like we asked a similar question yesterday.
Yeah.
And it just like we ended up coming to the same conclusion yesterday that like it doesn't even matter to think about this because we can't do anything because we're so small in the universe. It's the same thing here as like, does it even matter if our fates are predetermined? Because there's only two options. Like you either just live out your predetermined fate or you do everything you can to break your fate. But either way, you're still living out your life and you're still just being you. So what's the point of even discussing this?
Yeah, so it's kind of the idea of like, okay, so going back to the original question, like if you knew you were going to die at 25, should that even change what you're doing? Like, I guess under this theory, it shouldn't change. Like,
yeah, it's funny because in the beginning of this podcast, our whole theory on this was the opposite. Remember we were talking about if I knew I would die at 25, I'd do like a bunch of cocaine.
But I think it applies differently to if your outcome is negative versus your outcome is positive. Like, because if your outcome is positive, you would want to live up to that positive outcome. But I feel like if someone told me like, oh, you're predetermined to go to hell or you're going to die when you're 25, like I feel like the negative outcome, I think this is why. I think that we all live our lives expecting a positive outcome. And that's why only a negative outcome actually changes our behavior. Dude. Right? Because we live our lives expecting to live until 100, right? Or like expecting to live long. But like, and we all have that kind of like, that like predetermined notion. So when we're told that we're going to die when we're 25, that's what changes our behavior because our original trajectory was always assuming a positive outcome.
You're so right. Yeah, you're so right. No, you're so. I think that's exactly what we were confused about because we had these two theories, but once you break it down into positive or negative, like the positive theory works perfectly for the living up to your expectations, and the negative theory works perfectly for like the screw it, I'm going to ruin my life because I'm destined to fail anyway.
Yeah.
I feel like that can be used really well in parenting because like I know a lot of there's a common mentality within parents where it's like if you don't do this you're going to fail. Like if you don't do XYZ you're going to end up living on the streets. But like putting a negative picture into a child's mind can only bring them down like ever. If you do the opposite of like, oh, keep doing what you're doing, even if they're not doing what they're doing, like just keep doing what you're doing so that they can live
you're
up to
going to
their
be successful. Like, if you like tell your kid like, oh, like, if you keep like studying hard, or if you keep like doing this, and you're going to be successful.
As opposed to if you stop doing this, then you're not going to be successful.
I guess like why did we kind of like why are we raised assuming the positive outcome? Because the truth is like, like only a certain amount of people do actually become successful. So like why is our default like of the positive versus the negative?
I don't think that's true.
Or like is that like healthy? Like,
yeah. Well, okay. So for the first question, like. First of all, I think that a lot of kids grow up thinking that they're going to be failures and that that demotivates them, which goes along with our theory, but oftentimes like it does motivate them, which goes against our theory, because our theory is that if it's a negative situation and you frame a negative picture, then you're going to end up with a negative outcome.
But also I feel like if it's negative, then like if we're kind of set up, I feel like a lot of times like when you envision too much success, you're kind of set up to fail. You know, versus if you had like a more moderate kind of goal, like for example, like if you told yourself when you're young, like I'm going to become a CEO, like anything, even if you do become successful, but you're not a CEO, anything below that will be considered like you failed, like your goal, like you didn't achieve your goal.
But I think that's a good mindset.
It's a good mindset in the sense that like your outcome is positive, but you are not satisfied with what you got, I guess.
So would you define that as success still? Like, would you define, because obviously my success would be different from someone else's success. But if I've reached a place that is like objectively considered successful by most people, yet I'm still not satisfied, am I successful, or does success just come from satisfaction?
I think our perception of success, there's like a principle in psych. It's just like our perception of success is always relative to other people. Like we perceive, like for example, like we perceive like our like intelligence and our success in relation to those we know, right? Because we don't necessarily like I don't look at Elon Musk and then I'm like, oh, compared to him, I'm unsuccessful. Like, I mean, I think that he's successful, but I don't feel bad that I'm not that successful because I don't compare myself to that. But I compare myself to the people around me. So like my friends, my friend group. And like if like they were to accomplish something more than I would, then I'd be like, oh, like I need to match their success, right? Yeah. So I think that it's all like relative. So I think that like that's why I feel that you are almost like, if your goals are almost too high, you might actually be set up to fail because it's like relative to what your goal was, you didn't achieve it.
That's interesting too. Yeah, I think we should dedicate a whole episode to talking about like how the people surrounding us impact our views and beliefs. Like the whole you compare yourself to those around you, but if those around you aren't successful, then will you be successful?
Yeah. That was really interesting. So we'll just end it here. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.